Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Vincent and this is the second video of this tutorial series in which I want to talk about composition, lights, rendering, materials and all these things. And we will do everything in Redshift. So let's directly get started. So hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of this tutorial. And in this part we will talk about materials and I would say actually a lot about design. You can see overall for my scene I created additional cloth surface and I had a little bit of a camera animation, so the overall simulation is a bit more interesting. Then I want to explain a little bit of my usual workflow, because often when I especially work for free projects which should be sometimes quicker, or sometimes I don't want to invest any new time in creating new materials, and I'm opening some old projects and I'm copying together different shaders in here. And these are all shaders from my actual texture pack, the second one, which hopefully every one of you got last month, and then you can perfectly follow me here. And before the tutorial I created a few additionals and I copied some together. Now we have a huge selection of different materials which we can apply to our objects. And in this tutorial I want to, try to get you to understand my design thinking. So let's start from the very bottom with the first material here. This is the texture pack 1. And perhaps you didn't have this. For example, I have two tessellations here in my Redshift object tag, and maximum displacement of 5 and a displacement scale of 1. And again, to give you a super quick overview of how tessellated this is, first of all, I need to make a bit more room on my screen because the recording size is smaller. So I think now this is a pretty good layout, and you can see that I'm rendering in 1080 by 2090 Ti, so it's 9 by 16. And actually, I'm running a bit higher resolution, so it's 2048 by 1152. And I'm doing this to be able to cut out some parts of the animation, and I have the feeling that if you render it a little bit bigger and scale it a little bit down, the quality is even better. And usually I rendered everything 4 by 5, but now where reels are getting more important and stories are important, and I don't know, perhaps someday I want to upload my stuff at TikTok. 9 by 16 is the best format, and you can see actually I didn't do a lot of design for the top and bottom, so it's very cheap to render these parts as well. And anyway, I will crop it down for other formats. So checking out my blue material here, and I wanted to show you the tessellation of my object. It's always important to get an overview of how intense this is, and perhaps we can have a look at it again and see if we can fine-tune something. And perhaps I need just a little bit more room here. So for example, these ones are pretty high and this one is pretty high, but yeah, let's play around with some of the values. What if we have a minimum edge length of 1 and try to increase? Okay, 0.2 is definitely too low because now everything is black, and you can see when it starts to think about the optic stuff, then it's very slow. So I'm trying to get some variation for the displacement by adding some minimum edge length, but I'm not sure. I think this would look kind of crappy if we put this into displacement. This area is less placed and this is more. And I took a screenshot. Actually, let's make a picture viewer and let's get back to 0 and 3. And this is like super high in the tessellation. Really, sometimes I have the feeling that Redshift makes these blocks, for example, here and here, you can see that. And when we increase the displacement a lot, I start to tend to see this kind of tessellation. So that's why I'm experimenting and trying out something here to see if I can get rid of this. And actually, I didn't plan to do this in tutorial, but as I said, perhaps this video is a bit more my try and error and design thinking, and perhaps some little bit of problem solving here. But overall, the image on the right has way more displacement, so our details in the displacement material would definitely look better. But obviously it gets lower, so I wouldn't go. 3 is already quite a high value. I tried 4 in the rendering as well, which looks pretty nice on some of the materials, but it gets pretty slow. So for the first working round, I would say let's try to go with 2. Yeah, so I'm sticking with the 2, 0 and 2 because I don't want these pieces here. That I think that would look weird in the displacement. Then let's go back to our blue material, and this is like, it's quite interesting. For all, I like the look, and I'll just keep one object in here. I'm not yet sure about my whole composition, and actually when I see all these colors here, they are too bright. Let's try to give it some other random color. I'm selecting all of them and assigning a random color. And perhaps this also could help you to define a color space which you really like. Something red, blue, it looks very playful and kind of childish. Don't know if it's the best working environment to judge anything in here. So let's go with a very gray material and something like that. That helps us perhaps to identify which look we want to go. Then let's drag and drop another material, and perhaps this time I'll start from top to bottom. So foam shiny, I think there's not a real material, it's just something copied out of somewhere, and this is probably a volumetric material. So let's get rid of these two materials right away, we don't need them. Let's have a look at this material. Meh, not really doing something. Let's get rid of this as well. And this one looks pretty nice. I played around with that before. It's quite of a rough cloth-like material. And what I also always like to do is like scrub a few frames and see how everything looks. And for now also the strings are really distracting the eye because they look so weird gray. Let's just copy some random material and put it on. I think it's already looking a bit better. So yeah, the pillow thingy looks nice. Perhaps we will go with this one. Then let's see, dotted. This looks also pretty nice, the material. And this one looks nice. Or this one. Yeah, this one looks nice. This one. Let's say we'll go with this one. Then let's see what else we got. Red plastic. Color-wise, red and blue are really difficult to combine, I would say. So the image right now looks definitely terrible. And I will think about the colors later. We want to create some color contrast in there, but I'm not so sure about the red thingy. Let's get rid of it for now. And I have this dark fabric material, and I think it looks nice. Let's definitely put that into the composition, and let's have a look at the last frame. Let's see, some of the bed sheets could be interesting, perhaps this one. Then let's continue with the materials. Could be also interesting color-wise. It's obviously we have a very, it's biting the eye, these types, two different blues. So let's get rid of it for now. No. Say this is a note material. Continuing, this could be something, and that's this material. So if you're having this as well, I would say the scale is perhaps a bit too small for this scene. We need to scale this up, and this material is just connected with a constant node, so it's easy. You can just select that and define it, or you just go them and also change the number here. Both of the workflows are nice, and sometimes I'm doing like this, and sometimes I don't bother to do the constant, and I just select all of the materials and scale them up at once. Perhaps on a mattress, another piece would be nice. Or this piece is also kind of looking nice with the material on it. Let's see, at the end we see this pretty good. Or this one. Let's say this one. And if we have a look on this guy, I would still say the scale is too small. Because look at the material, it's quite big. It's more like a carpet kind of thingy. And let's have a look on the displacement. It's already quite strong. So I'd say this guy needs another tag to get even more tessellation, and that the displacement is definitely better. And let's for now duplicate the camera and get rid of our keyframes here. And I just want to create a close-up camera to get a better idea of this material. So let's also render only one piece, and I'm pressing Shift to get a preview for this part. Let's think about this one. It's not too bad, but I think the displacement is too much. And let's try how it looks if we go with a negative displacement. And that's also pretty much what I do very often with the materials. Most of the time you can't drag and drop them on the objects and it works perfectly. Very often you have to fine tune the materials. And I would say this looks pretty nice. And we have a bit of an opacity going on here, and I think that's quite interesting. And there are different ways, by the way, to adjust the opacity. You can plug it into the opacity layer, or you can make a sprite node. And use it there as an opacity map. The good thing with the sprite node, you can create very many objects and the opacity will always go on. And with the opacity material, there is like a limit. And to increase the depth of opacity steps, you need a lot of rendering power. So the sprite node is way more easier to render, but in this case, we wouldn't have needed it. So let's also check for the materials. We have a scale of 2 and the sprite node also needs a scale of 2. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, now everything's a bit more scaled up. And displacement wise, yeah, I think, was it this way better or the other way? Let's also try the positive value again to see how it looks. Yeah, let's go for positive, but only with 0.7 so that these bumps are not that intense. And if we zoom out the camera, I think, yep, this looks pretty nice. Then let's continue with some paper. And that's like a super glossy metal-like paper, metallic finish it has. So I think the look on this material could be quite interesting. Then let's have a look onto some other materials, fine paper. And we have so few objects left, it's hard to see what we are doing there. And the fine paper is very fine. So perhaps let's switch again to the other camera and have a look. For example, this material is not assigned yet, so we will see what the fine paper is doing there. This one is not assigned yet. It's really hard to see what's going on here. Perhaps we drag the fine paper over the blue one to get a better representation. It's pretty nice. It has some interesting details. Perhaps this is even better than the blue one. Let's keep it. Let's keep it on to this one. Then what else? The one on the bottom is not assigned yet. And what do we get here? From the texture pack, pretty rough material. Let's try another one. And perhaps for now we also hide our spinnies. Oh wait, that was the whole null, sorry. Let's collect all the surfaces, put them into a null. And ropes, let's hide the ropes so I can concentrate more on the material. And that's a wood material. And perhaps that's even interesting to see wood material onto the whole scene. But first of all, I think the wood material is a bit too saturated. Here, this part is too orangey, I would say. So let's drop down some of the values a little bit. Yeah, definitely it's better. Let's have a look onto our whole image. Which part would be interesting to see as a wood material? Or perhaps it would be interesting if the sky would be wood, because it's quite stiff and like if, yeah, let's see. I think that's nicer, and the wood material can get a bit more desaturated and a bit more dark. And let's go closer to the object, and that's looking pretty good, I would say. Perhaps we could make this guy a bit more glossy by introducing a little bit of a coat. Let's see how it looks. Because the wood is quite rough, and now we add a bit of a shininess on top. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And perhaps we play around a little bit with the scale. Let's make it a bit bigger, and perhaps we need to offset the wood, so perhaps we see a few more lines at some point. Something like that. And perhaps we can even like emphasize the color. So I will put a ramp from the diffuse, and I'm kind of creating my own AO, and let's see if we can put all together onto a color layer. And let's put this in here and layer color 1, and I want to multiply, and I want pretty much of a contrasty image here. And let's this into the base color, and then let's see what we get. And I think perhaps we need 10 or 20%, like 1 is definitely way too much. Or we make darken, see if we get a bit more from the wood. Multiply. I think it's too dark. Yeah, that's definitely emphasizing the pattern for our wood here. And now we can lower the intensity by a lot. So we have 0.2, something like that, or a little bit more. And I think this helps us to understand the material, so it's easier to read what this is. And from this scale, we can even make it bigger. And perhaps we even scale the material a little bit bigger, So I'm trying 1.5 here to see if the wood texture would be easier to understand. And I think so, but now too much black. Cool. Then let's continue by dragging on the next material. By the way, this guy could perhaps be the glossy part from the beginning. Some shiny one, or this one could be also shiny one. Yeah, I think this one is good to go with shiny. Then this material was actually a fake grass material from like this train building sets, and it's quite bumpy and rough. And do I like it in our composition here? Let's, I don't know, have a look at the animation from the beginning again. And don't know, not 100% sure. Let's try out a few other materials. So this is interesting. Let's see if we get closer what we get there. It's with these tiny dots. They have metallic dots in there. That's quite interesting, I would say. And perhaps this can go somewhere else. And I feel like this material is pretty like a hero material. Perhaps this material should go onto here. Let's see how it looks there. And it's a bit too big in our scale, so I don't have to scale down the shader itself. I can also go just quickly scale down the lengths at U and the V. Let's keep it for there. Then what else do we got? A scatter material, I think this is. And scatter materials with the new random walk algorithms, pretty nice. So it's in here. And let's make it all the way scatter with 1% of the weight. And for the color, I don't know, let's make it a bit more light. Yeah, that's super nice. And actually increase the code, decrease the roughness so it looks a bit kind of weird and ugly. And which one should be the one which will be scattering? Let's have a look onto this piece. Looks nice. This one looks nice. Actually, this one also looks pretty nice with the scatter. I don't know, or perhaps the big mattress. I think I'll go with the big mattress. And the smallest mattress will get the black cloth material here. Because it's a pretty nice contrast here, we have some very bright and dark areas then. And I'm always trying to find some interesting contrasts in the materials. Color-wise, we definitely have to work on the thing because there's too much beige going on. But for now, I only want to choose the feeling for the materials. Let's see, something glossy in here. Could work with this one. Let's continue. But also in the end, I don't want to have too many glossy materials. But it should be a nice contrast between some very glossy and some very rough materials. This one looks a bit boring. Perhaps it's because the scale is too small and we don't see the actual material. But let's try out some other ones. And we can have a look at this one down here. By the way, when I'm looking at this frame, I think the scatter material is too intense. It takes too much attention and it's just too much. Perhaps in this scene, we don't want to have anything scattered. So I'm overriding the scatter material with this material here. And let's drag out one material which we already used, going close to the object. Might be scale, but also it's a bit boring. Perhaps we want to try out something a bit more intense. Let's see, some green one. That's pretty nice. Also, I have this one with a lot of opacity in here. This looks pretty nice, but we need to adjust the scale. I think the scale should be a bit smaller. So let's try out 3, and the opacity is a little bit too much in this case. So we need to select a ramp which goes into the opacity, and we need a bit more white and less black. So white means no transparency and black means 100%, and our map is somewhere in between. So now we have a few less holes, and let's even try to lower it a bit more so that it's not that transparent. Displacement is really looking nice. It's very strong displacement here, and it's definitely good to integrate some colors to our rendering, which looks a bit boring at this point. Then let's continue. Which material? Perhaps this one. So I can get close to the one. That's nice, but for example, you can see the cuts for the UVs here. So perhaps we need something a bit more subtle so so that's not that obvious that our UVs are not perfect at this point here. And I remember the blue one here is pretty subtle and it looked nice. Yeah, this could be something, but definitely our scale is way too big for this one. So I'm selecting all the materials here, and let's try a value of 3. And let's check the displacement for now here as well. It's very little displacement. Perhaps we can increase it to, I don't know, something like 0.6. And that's looking nice. Then let's see, I think we got all the materials. Then let's put on the ropes again. And we need to work on the light, on the color composition, and on let's first try to judge the balance between like super rough and displaced materials and glossy ones. I like the gloss material here, which has an opacity. This one is nice. This one, I'm not 100%. Perhaps we will switch this with the dark one. So switching the two of the materials. And let's see how it looks. Perhaps now this area could be too dark. And I'm not 100% sure if the dark one will even fit into our whole composition. But I think this looks pretty good. Might need a little bit more light on this object. So the contrast is not too high between the actual objects and the material itself. Let's make it even a little bit brighter. And I want to switch the lines here so that this UV seam is not so visible. Let's select all of our materials and rotate them by 90 degrees. And there's still a metalness in here. Actually, we don't need this because this material isn't metal. Let's check. Perhaps in the IOR we can go a bit more glossy to get a bit more gradient on the material. Then also we can reduce again a bit of the gamma for the material. So it gets a bit darker again, and perhaps even increase the contrast a little bit. Let's check out the normal. We have 1, perhaps this could be even 1.2, a little bit more rough. And the displacement is 0.7, and we'll try out 0.8. If we have such a fine displacement for this material, I think mostly all of the nearly all of the materials are having fine displacement. So actually we can go onto our Redshift tag, which is aligned to all of the ones here, and even increase the maximum subdivisions to 3. And then we don't need this tag anymore because it is also 3. And now we have a lot more tessellation going on, and let's see how my computer is handling this. I think it's still quite okay, but I tried it out. When you go with 4, you will kill your computer. And now you can see the black material here definitely looks better. And also this one looks better with this increased tessellation. And also this one looks way nicer. Color-wise. And no, not color-wise. Still on the haptics for the materials. Yeah, for now I will, go back to 2 again, because you have seen that when I switch the frames, the rendering takes a while. At the end we can put this up to 3 for the final rendering. So I love these color variations down here. It's lots of cold colors. Perhaps these 2 are cold colors, and perhaps we want to create a direct color contrast here with a warm color, or we create a warm color up here or there. Let's try to change the color here. So I'm selecting the green one, and I already have a color contrast here. We can just shift our hue a little bit to the right so it's getting more yellowish, and perhaps even the saturation can go up a little bit. And that's also good to know. You can go even higher than the 1. Well, actually, I have to go in the other way. This looks also kind of nice, even though I never use this color tone. It's yeah, really interesting to see what kind of colors I'm using. And in the end, I'm always stuck with the same. Shame on me. There's so many nice colors. So I think this is good. I think this is a good idea to go with the color contrast between the cold colors here and the warm color there. Then, by the way, is there a depth of field in there? I just don't know. There's none. It looks like, because of the reflection, it looks like this is already in the unsharp area. Okay, so the matrices are not good yet because they look too much like the same, and also the gray one in the middle, not so sure about this. Let's try to swap some of the materials and perhaps add a color in there. And I think that's a good idea. We are following the concept of cool colors, these 3 cool, and we have lots of warm earth tone colors. Yeah, I think we're in a good place here. Let's have a look onto this material, because from the distance it looks a bit boring. Perhaps it would be nice to get more displacement detail on this one. So I want to show you this one when I'm closer. Perhaps this works better on the top of the mattress. So swapping this one with cube 3. No, wait, cube 1. That's the one. We need something for this guy. So let's see. Perhaps this material or the foam guy. But then the foam definitely needs to be smaller because we have the UV space is pretty compressed here. Something in between, a little bit bigger. But I think it's not too bad, this material here. Let's check out the foam itself. Perhaps it can have more displacement. It doesn't look too displaced in this preview. So let's try out 2. Looks pretty nice. It looks definitely nice. Let's even try out 3. And perhaps it's still a teeny tiny bit too small. Let's try 65 and perhaps this time, yeah, sometimes Redshift is doing this kind of spikes with the displacement. Now they are gone again. I think we are a little bit too much. Let's try out 2.7 and then I think this will look nice. So let's check out the overall color variation and contrasts. We have 2 very orangey warm colors at the bottom, 2 very cold colors at the bottom, and a lot of beige colors going on. Perhaps something yellow is missing on the whole composition, but we still have our ropes to color. And let's do that. And first of all, I want to put in a UV checker because definitely our clothes are deformed. If we go pretty close, I can then see and faster adjust the UV scaling for this one. And let's try out a value of 15 for the V. And perhaps this is the wrong one. I'm always switching them. Dun, 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 dun. It was wrong. So the U value needs to be scaled down. And this time I'm trying out even 10. And let's see how it will look. Yeah, but overall the texture scale is really small. Let's try out 20 and 150. And also when I'm this close to the material, it definitely feels too thick. And wait, the scale needs to be changed. And I'm not sure if I went in the wrong direction, if the UV needs to be smaller again. Let's see, yeah, it needs to be smaller again. So perhaps 12 and 150 is good. And as I said, the thickness is too much. Let's go with 0.3. And we should check if we go lower, if still we don't have any intersection with the material, because we had some polygon poking, and I think especially in the beginning, I think on the left areas there were some looking through. I'm still too stretched. Let's try out 10. Let's try out 175 to 10. Let's also check this area if we have some poking here. Let's try out 200. And am I doing this wrong? Wait, 200 will make it better. Yeah, so 10 to 200 looks good from the scaling. And I think we have some polygon looking through, but that's because of the displacement. So let's check our cloth material. From this close, it looks really awkward. We have a displacement of 2.7. Let's try out 2.5. And we have a little bit of a positive displacement here. So I have minus 0.5 to 0.55. Let's try to reduce the displacement a bit so it doesn't get too pulled out this much. And now you can see we get rid of some of them. Let's try to fine tune everything a little bit more, and I will reduce the displacement, and also the positive range of the displacement will be less, so there will be less poking. And let's see, yeah, that's pretty much it, I would say. And let's scrub a few more frames to see if we get some issues, perhaps here. No, I think this looks good. And well, this was supposed to be a super quick tutorial because the other one was already pretty long, but I think this is very nice to give you the idea or the understanding of the design process, that really very little details come into account for the whole composition, and you can't just drag and drop the materials there and hit render. You really have to look on details. In the end, everything plays together very well. So now we know the scaling, 10 to 200, and let's try out one material, how that will look. And that looks interesting. And you can see the edge feels very sharp for this material because we don't have any blurred edges. And you can see there's still some polygon poking happening. Perhaps again, we need to even reduce this guy a little bit more. Let's try a value from 2.2 and a negative to positive scale by 0.4. Let's wait a little bit. Yeah, and there's teeny tiny holes in there, but this time I want to try to cover this up with the thickness for our cloth. And yeah, as I said, we want to bevel the edges. And I think the easiest way is just to create a Redshift tag, and I'll just copy my tag down there, and let's activate it. And I have one subdivision and I have displacement activated as well. I think displacement will be definitely nice if we have some cloth material going on. And now we can see directly that we are tessellating the object. So at the edge, we will have a more smooth edge. And let's try even a value of 2. So we have more steps and the edges will be a bit more sharper. And we have way more displacement going on here because we have a higher tessellation. And this looks definitely good, the edge for this thing, but the red material is pretty intense. Let's leave it in there and let's have a look at the final composition if this can be something, but let's see. Then we need to put on some cloth materials. So this one is a cloth material, and somehow my PC gets low. Perhaps we'll only get with one tessellation here. Perhaps some of the parts are too intense, and I've duplicated the material here so that we have still the same scale, so it's 10 by 200 to put on something, and I have on cloth material created from the texture pack rough cloth canvas. And let's go closer and have a look. And I think the material scale is tiny. Let's try out 1 and still tiny. So the overall scale from 10 to 200 is really tiny still. So let's try 20 by 400. To see if the overall scale feels a bit better for the material. Yes, and let's increase the displacement by quite a lot. And to the front, I already like how this looks, but let's get rid of the opacity so this anyway renders faster. And let's see, we got these blocks, and that's what I meant before, that the Redshift sometimes makes these triangle stripes displacement thingy. We need to lower the displacement, or we need to increase the tessellation, or we could try to give our object one subdivision from the cloth object itself. Let's see, now the triangles are just smaller. So let's drop down the displacement and let's have a look onto the zoom out image. Yeah, and from this, I think the material is still too small. Let's go with 30 by 500, or I could just select the materials as well and change the value of the scale here, and I will do that as well. Let's try 0.6 so we really make it bigger. It's still, from this image, there's nearly nothing to see at the side. 0.4, I'm making bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, I have to get rid of the red one. It's really killing my eye here. So goodbye. But yeah, this looks good now. Duplicate the material here, and let's see some other materials. What did I use here? Some canvas, or didn't I? Smooth cloth, soft diffuse. Is it? No wait, where am I now? Yeah, the PC is definitely getting slower. Let's get rid of the subdivision here. So this material, for example, the orange one isn't assigned yet. Let's have a look what I did with the orange one. It's paper yellow wrinkle diffuse. I'm not so sure if the wrinkled material will be good for this one. Perhaps the small one, the tiny one in the middle. Which one is it? Not this one, not this one, not this one, this one. And I want one more cloth material, and the other material should be transparent. And let's have a look onto a glass material. And there's a teeny tiny bit of noise in there, and it's a bit of a roughness. Let's give it a transmission as well. And I want a yellow glass, yellowish glass. And I make it a little bit darker because right now you can see if the light hits the material, we have a lot of scattering around in the glass and it gets really bright. But that's too red. Let's make it more brighter again and less in saturation. And we are getting close. Just a tiny little bit tweak here. Let's keep this material perhaps on that one. And now let's have a look onto just one glossy, simple material. And I remembered 3400, but these two materials are the same. That's not good. So let's duplicate the material and replace this one. And let's say that's gonna be the one on the top or the one on the bottom. And we need to switch the hue a little bit. And let's have a look onto the scatter material. And we only have two cloth objects left. And the scatter material doesn't look nice here. Dark paper, perhaps. Yeah, let's make one dark papery, and the scale needs to be adjusted correctly again. And I want to duplicate the glass material and just put it on some of the materials there as well to get a second transparent material, but that's gonna be white, pretty white. So I'm making it a little bit more gray so it's not that bright. And this time the material should be way more rough. So I'm changing the ramp. And let's see, that's too bright on the top because also I think there's the most light. It needs to be something different. Let's see if we use this gray one for a glass material and top one with the gray one. Yeah, that's better. And I think this is also nice here. Or we switch these two. And I'm switching them because I thought it would be nice that not both of the glass materials are at the same, like close to each other. So we have some variations going on here. And let's have a look onto the frames at the end. And I think this is really getting somewhere. I like it so far. Guess I'm not 100% sure with the blue or with, it's a really intense contrast here. Perhaps also because these materials are so bright and this is so dark. Let's play around with the color to see what we get there. Perhaps something works better in this kind of brightness. So our material must be brighter. Then it gets more purple-like, and but yeah, perhaps even less saturated and even more bright. And yeah, I like the, yeah, it's good. I'm just thinking if our contrast has a good balance between darks and brights, we have to be careful that we are not getting too saturated in the overall image. And also yellow and purple contrast is like a complementary contrast, but there I have to tell you that you have to be very careful with these contrasts because it's so overused and really is looking very quickly cheesy. But I think in our way it still works because we have only little of this. Just perhaps we could decrease the saturation of the yellow to perhaps it works better then. Let's see if it isn't that saturated. And for example, I really like what's happening here when we see the material through the glass. I think it's better with less saturation. Is it too colorful? No, I don't think so. Do we have enough contrast with the background? So we have a pretty dark area here on the right, which is nice. And our front light is pretty intense. Perhaps we even need a spotlight on this area. Could be interesting. But let's also have a look onto the material on the back. So I'm blending two materials together, one glowing, one non-glowing, and they're 50-50. So I'm using now a bit more from the non-glowing material. So then the background will be perhaps slightly darker, and the material, let's see how it looks if it's a bit more dark. Then the contrast is higher here, but no, I think the contrast is too much now. I think it was already nice, this level of bright and medium. I would say let's leave it like here. Let's just try out one last thing. As I said, the spot. I'm making my lights visible and I'm selecting the spot material. And let's scale this down, and I want the spread to be very low. So 0.1, so we have a very sharp edge and a strong shadow. You can already see the light in here. Perhaps to make it even more understandable, we only spotlight the spotlight, and perhaps we check out the center for the lights. We need to move them a little bit more in place. Yeah, and the spotlight is way too strong. And my spotlight has a target tag onto the center, so if I'm moving it a bit more down, you can see the spot is also going a bit more down. Spot is still way too strong, and perhaps it's a bit more narrow. I'm moving it a little bit more down. Yeah, let's see how it will play together. Then we have a rim light, which gives us this edge here. We can perhaps even make it more on the edge and reduce the intensity a little bit. I think we only need very little light here. Then the light on the top, that's our main light. It fills out all the shadows on the left. And now the dome light fills out the overall lights. And I think the dome light is a bit too bright. Let's drop it down a little bit and see how it looks. Still too bright. Now I have the feeling the spotlight is a bit too much to the front and still too strong. Let's try out 15. Yes, getting better. So 16, and the dome light can be a little bit brighter to ease out everything a bit more. And perhaps now because we have a different light situation, we need to have a look again onto the material color on the background and make it a tiny little bit brighter, because now there's less light from the dome light hitting the back, so it's a bit darker. We could also make it a bit more brighter if we mix in a little bit more from the incandescent material. And I think this looks nice. Perhaps the spot is still too bright, but let's have a look on a few frames. Yeah, I think it's still too strong. Perhaps we can make it even a bit bigger, so we have a more uniform light here. So I'll go with 125, and then the intensity I will drop down to 13, and perhaps the intensity of the spread is even a bit less, so I'll drop it down to 0.2, so the light gets a bit more soft on the right and we have a bit of more overall light. So now there should be more light down here and more down here, and yeah, it looks good, but now it's too weak. Let's drop it up to 15 again, and even 16, and you can see the intensity for the light really changes a lot with the spread. Let's make it a little bit more strong again, so 0.17, and yeah, now we have a nice spot. It looks great. We have a bit of a shadow from the right, that's good. Everything looks nice. There's just looking at these two colors, perhaps we need to make this color a little bit brighter and less saturated. Let's see if this part looks better when we make it a bit more desaturated. Yeah, I think that's better. Yeah, it has a nice overall look. We have some dark contrast in the bottom, but the main light is here. We have a complementary color contrast, which draws our eyes here. Because anyway, the bright spot is here. And let's see, a few more frames. Yeah, perhaps we can move the light a little bit more down. So I'm using the center to drop that down so the spotlight is more spotting this area, and that looks nice. So I'm pretty happy with everything we did together. The simulation looks nice, the colors are interesting, and the light's looking good. And I think now we can actually hit the render button. For that, I did explain this as well, but let's have a quick look. So it's 2048 by 1152. I'm rendering from frame 15 to 200, that's 186 frames, and I'm rendering in a medium quality. There's one thing which I didn't figure yet out. Every time I'm using deformation blur, the whole scene gets really fucked up. It takes like 20 minutes to calculate the deformation blur. And for example, from my tests, like only the first frame renders the materials, and the second frame, some of the materials are dropping and then it renders white, especially the ones with the opacity were very strange and didn't render. So for now, we need to turn off the deformation blur. I don't know, it's a bug on my PC. Would be super interesting to see your tests and results. And let me know if you have the same issue. Otherwise, it would be really great to render with deformation blur because all the objects are only deforming. There's not a lot of motion in there. So our motion blur won't work. But yeah, that's for now. And yeah, that's everything. I'm rendering 32 bits OpenEXR with a 16-bit compression line. And let's save and hit render. So at this point, again, thank you very much for this listening. It was a pretty intense month, a lot of talking, but yeah, everything happening now in cinema is super exciting and I'm very happy. And yeah, I really enjoy learning right now. So I wish you a great time. See you around and thank you very much. Bye bye.